Gabriel Garcia Marquez is a Nobel Prize winning author that has written many novels, essays, and short stories that tackle themes of death, religion, loneliness, colonization, and gender. His three short stories, The Last Voyage of the Ghost Ship, The Handsomest Drowned Man in the World, and Death Beyond Constant Love, all feature themes of gender, more specifically toxic masculinity. Analyzing gender issues like the patriarchy and toxic masculinity is always done best through a feminist lens that evaluates the disempowering of one gender in favor of another. As Judith Butler argues, gender is a social construct of which there is no original but is instead a performative behavior which is socialized into individuals externally. Gabriel Garcia Marquez criticizes toxic masculinity in his short stories The Voyage of the Last Ghost Ship, The Handsomest Drowned Man in the World, and Death Beyond Constant Love through the characterization of the male characters. The author criticizes toxic masculinity in his short story The Voyage of the Last Ghost Ship through the main character's obsession with proving his masculinity to the villagers. He kept going on and on about a ghost ship he saw for years and no one ever saw it. The villagers were tired of hearing about it and beat him up. They covered him with blows and left him so twisted. Throughout the whole story, the main character repeats to himself, "Now they're going to see who I am." They is the villagers who do not believe him and will see who he really is. The repetition of the phrase, "Now they're going to see who I am," throughout the whole story is a refrain that helps with the order of the story and reminds the character why he's doing what he's doing and what he's trying to prove as motivation. The refrain also links the story to an epic that makes him seem like the hero of his own story. The villagers had beat him up and left him there broken, and he is emasculated by being beaten by them as they think he is lying about the ghost ship, and he quickly develops an obsession with proving them wrong, which would prove and validate his masculinity, and this becomes quickly toxically masculine. His tone towards the villagers is aggressive as he is determined to prove them wrong. It criticizes masculinity by showing how he spent his whole life obsessing over the, the ship, which would prove his masculinity, showing how fragile masculinity can be and how quickly it can become toxic, and the negative effects it can have on not just the society but the person themselves. And according to Medical News Today, toxic masculinity is a harmful concept of masculinity that also places an important significance on manliness based on strength, lack of emotion, self sufficiency, and dominance. According to traditional toxic masculine views, a male who does not display enough of these traits may fall short of being a quote unquote real man. Overemphasis of these traits may lead to harmful imbalances in someone trying to live up to these expectations. Some examples of these include aggression, hypercompetitiveness, needing to dominate or control others, isolation, and entitlement.
Through the male characters' jealousy and resentment of the drowned man, Gabriel Marquez critiques toxic masculinity in The Handsomest Drowned Man. Before taking a look at Esteban's divine features, the men called him a piece of cold Wednesday meat. Because meat is not consumed on Wednesdays during Lent in Catholic culture, the metaphor implies that the drowned man is worthless. The author also used religious allusions to Lent in order to evoke imagery of Christ and Catholic rites, to highlight the drowned man being idolized as a religious figure by the people. Secondary source. According to SpunOut.ie, toxic masculinity is used to describe how certain masculine traits cause harm to men themselves, and are also harmful to women and others. Toxic masculinity can assume all men are straight and cisgender, and suggest that this is the way they should be, which of course is not true. Toxic masculinity spreads the message that in order to be a real man, you have to suppress your emotions, act tough, and behave a certain way. Showing any feminine traits is to show signs of weakness. The men said, "Since when has there ever been such a fuss over a drifting corpse?" Through lexical choice, by using words fuss and drifting corpse, The author highlights the men's jealousy over the attention their wives are giving to the drowned man. Moreover, this emphasizes how toxically masculine the men are, as they do not live up to the same hegemonic standards as the drowned man's corpse. Therefore, they feel the need to insult it out of insecurity. Thus, Gabriel Marquez critiques toxic masculinity in the Handsomest Drowned Man through the male character's jealousy and resentment towards the drowned man.
Death Beyond Constant Love by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. This is the last short story. Throughout the novel Death Constant Beyond Love, Marquez is able to develop the different treatments of both genders through the mistreatment towards women in the short story. Mistreating and disempowering women is mainly highlighted through how when the senator wanted to sleep with the woman she had a lock, and her father having it, shows that the man has more power by having her the key. The father also the father also told her to tell him to send one of your people to get it and to send along with him a written promise that he will straighten out the situation. As she also abandoned herself to the mercies of her fate. The fact that the key was found in the possession of the father rather than the daughter serves to illustrate the superior power held by men by highlighting the fact that woman does not have access to power symbol represented by the key. In addition to this, the fact that the protagonist's daughter had sexual relations with another person despite the fact that she did not want to demonstrate that men have more power than women and can use women for sexual opportunities, which once again degrades the position of the protagonist's female characters in the novel. Last but not least, this mainly focuses on how in the real world women are typically used for sex which objectifies women, and how most of the time men force women to sleep with other men. Just like how Laura Farina clearly did not want to sleep with the senator, but she had no choice but to do so. Moreover, he realized then that she was naked under her dress, as well as her body gave off the dark fragrance of an animal of the woods, although her heart was frightened and her skin distracted by glacial sweat. Through the use of the metaphor, the author is able to describe the woman as a dark fragrance, meaning an attraction to darkness or night, finding relaxation or comfort in the darkness, highlighting how he comforts her being naked. This again sexualizes women and allows the idea of men over sexualizing them. Objectifying them, and using them for sex. All these examples are highlighting how the novel disempowers women and highlights the main idea of reality, on how women are usually sexualized in public and are looked at for their body. This also highlights how toxic masculinity can lead to these thoughts by men, and men over sexualize women. Therefore, Marquez is able to develop the mistreatment towards women in the short story and highlight the idea of how big of a difference between treatment of both genders are, and the big impact of toxic masculinity. Secondary resource. According to Carol Harrington, toxic masculinity is a term that came out of men movements in the late 20th century. Although feminists have started to blame toxic masculinity for misogyny, homophobia, and all of that, at the same time feminism was becoming more popular again. Some feminist scholars used the idea, but it wasn't always clear. Harrington thinks that talking about masculinity is an interesting way to look at gender politics in any place and anywhere. But feminists shouldn't use toxic masculinity as a way to look at things. He talks about where the term comes from and how it has been used, and why it is used that way. He also argues that it is used in individualizing discourses that have historically targeted men on the margins, and accusations of toxic masculinity are often used to keep gender roles in place and put the blame for both genders' inequality on a few bad men. Thank you.
In conclusion, Gabriel Garcia Marquez criticizes toxic masculinity through the portrayal of the male characters in his story The Last Voyage of the Ghost Ship, The Handsomest Drowned Man in the World, and Death Beyond Constant Love. These men in the stories are portrayed as being toxically masculine through either obsession with proving their masculinity, jealousy and resentment over other men, or feeling superior over women. Toxic masculinity is criticized in these stories as it highlights the harmful behaviors that cause a man's masculinity to become toxic, such as feeling threatened or emasculated, and shows the negative impact toxic masculinity has on men themselves and the people around them. It highlights how fragile modern day masculinity is and how easily it can become toxic and harmful.